Paramount buried a Yellowstone prequel set during the Second World War, a story following the Dutton family through the era that broke them. That would have changed everything about the entire Dutton universe. The deal was signed, then it vanished. You've heard about 1883, you've heard about 1923, but there's a chapter between those worlds that Paramount greenlighted, funded, and then quietly erased. The reason they killed it isn't what you've been told. The reason is worse than you think. And it starts with the most expensive talent deal in cable television history. To understand what got buried, you have to go back to 2021, when Yellowstone wasn't just a hit. It was the most-watched cable drama in America, pulling numbers that hadn't been seen since the network peak of the early 2010s. Paramount Network executives knew they had something generational, and they moved fast. Taylor Sheridan, the writer-director who built the Dutton world from scratch, was handed what insiders described as a blank check expansion mandate. The directive was simple: build the universe, make it as large as possible. Sheridan got to work. He pitched a string of prequels and spin-offs, and the one that generated the most internal excitement wasn't 1883 and it wasn't 1923. It was a story set in 1944. A Dutton chapter nobody had ever touched, covering the generation that went to war and came back to a ranch that no longer felt like theirs. Here's what actually existed. By early 2022, a project internally called 1944 had moved well past the concept stage. Sheridan had written a full series Bible tracking Spencer Dutton's lineage through the Pacific Theater and back to the Yellowstone Ranch. Paramount executives had reviewed it. A writer's room had been greenlighted and funded, with a first-season budget already being discussed in the range of $100 million. According to trade press coverage of Sheridan's expansion slate from that period, this wasn't a pitch sitting in development limbo. It was a live project with pages, a timeline, and studio money behind it. In a private meeting with Paramount Plus leadership, Sheridan reportedly described 1944 as the emotional keystone of the entire Dutton saga, the generation that explains every wound you see in John, in Bate, in Case. The deal was real. The money was real. And then the deal died. What happened next is where the story gets deliberately murky, because Paramount had every incentive to keep it that way. By summer 2022, Sheridan was simultaneously running Yellowstone Season 5, producing 1923, overseeing the 6666 Ranch spin-off, and shepherding Mayor of Kingstown and Tulsa King through production. The volume was extraordinary. Paramount loved the output but grew quietly nervous about how much of their most valuable franchise lived inside one man's head. Behind closed doors, a very different conversation was starting, one that had nothing to do with whether 1944 was good. It had everything to do with what Paramount was about to decide it could afford. Remember that signed deal? Here's where it died. In late 2022, Paramount was deep inside a financial restructuring tied to the acquisition conversations that would eventually become the Skydance merger. Budgets were being cut. Divisions were being evaluated by people who had never sat in a writer's room. And Paramount Plus, the streaming platform the entire Dutton universe was supposed to anchor, was losing ground to Netflix and HBO Max in a war that was getting ruinously expensive. The math changed overnight. Instead of expanding outward into new eras, Paramount made a strategic decision to collapse the slate and concentrate every available dollar on two assets: Yellowstone Season 5's conclusion and 1923, which already had Harrison Ford and Helen Mirren attached and could be sold to the press as a marquee event. 1944 had a great story and a $100 million greenlight, but it didn't have a star name. It didn't fit the new math, so they killed it quietly. No press release, no cancellation statement. The project ceased to exist between one budget meeting and the next. And here's the part they really buried. The decision wasn't creative. It was made by executives who were focused entirely on what 1944 would cost a struggling streamer, not on what it was worth to the Dutton legacy. The story didn't die because it wasn't good enough. It died because Paramount needed to look solvent to the people who were about to buy them. Think about what that means for the Dutton universe as it stands today. The 1940s is the missing era, the bridge between the frontier violence of 1883 and 1923 and the modern ranch wars of Yellowstone. It's the generation that fought a world war, came home carrying things they couldn't name, and planted the seeds of every Dutton pathology you've been watching for 6 seasons. Sheridan knew that. He built 1944 to close the loop on the entire saga. Without it, there is a hole in the Dutton timeline that no future spin-off will ever fill. The story existed. It was greenlit. They erased it. The question nobody is asking is whether Sheridan still has those pages. Because if he does, and if the Skydance acquisition reshuffles the executive deck the way insiders expect, there's another network watching this space very carefully. And they have a very different kind of deal in mind. Which studio? That's a whole other story.